Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're back for another aircraft review, this time in the newly released Carenado Seneca V. This video will be a full review, so as usual we'll take a look first at the external modelling and texturing of the aircraft. We'll then head inside and do the same, and then we'll be carrying out a full flight from Hobart over towards Devonport on the island of Tasmania. I think most of us are aware at this point that Carenado are more than capable of producing really high quality aircraft when it comes to modelling and texturing. So in today's review we won't focus too heavily on that. We will of course still take a look, but we'll perhaps focus on it slightly less than we would in other reviews. Carenado's downfall does often tend to be the aircraft systems and handling, so we'll aim to get the aircraft up in the air and get a good feel for that. I have to say that so far I've been very impressed with Carenado's offerings in Microsoft Flight Simulator, although I was a little bit disappointed with their previous release, the Piper Arrow 3, so I'll be quite interested to see whether or not this is up to their previous Microsoft Flight Simulator standards, or if we're going to see a few bugs creeping in here and there as we did with the Arrow. Anyway guys, as always I do hope you enjoyed the video and find it to be of use. If you do, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Now though, let's continue with our tour of the external model of the Seneca V before getting ourselves sat down in the cockpit and getting the aircraft started up. So as you can see, as usual, Carenado have done an absolutely wonderful job with the external modelling and texturing of the aircraft. All of the modelling and the texturing has been done to the most exacting standards as usual, and once again the PBR rendering of the aircraft lending itself to a really nice aesthetic as well. The same goes for the passenger cabin, that looks really excellent both inside and out. And as you can see, all of the aircraft's doors actuate as you would expect, and we also get all of the usual additions with the Carenado Seneca V. So for example we get the chocks, the fairings, the external battery and the tow bar. And as usual, as you can see with the main landing gear, even when we zoom right in at some of the more hidden away areas, the level of detailing is still rather nice on the aircraft. Anyway, I did say that we'll take a slightly more brief look at the external model of the aircraft this time, as we know that Carenado are absolutely top notch when it comes to external modelling and texturing. And as you can see, once again, they've really rather hit the ball out of the park with the Seneca V. We will take a little bit more of a look at the external model of the aircraft once we're up in the air, but for now let's head into the cockpit and see what we find in there. So once again, as you can see, the internal modelling of the aircraft really rather excellent. I really like the aesthetic of the cockpit as well in the Seneca V. I really like the layout of the cockpit. It's a nice balance between having some fairly decent modern avionics as well as some old school steam gauges. The aircraft does, as you might expect, still make use of the default GNS units, but of course if you do want a slightly higher fidelity experience you can swap those out with the modded GNS units. Overall though, once again Carenado doing a really excellent job in the cockpit. I think the texturing and the modelling is really nice. And again, even looking at the more hidden away areas of the internal model, we can see that the level of detail is still rather good. Taking a quick look in the passenger cabin, and you can see that once again the level of detail is really rather exquisite. The texturing in particular I think is done really nicely. The leather effect on the seats looks great, and as you can see even the stitching is done in really fine detail. Anyway, that just about wraps up our overview of the internal and external modelling and texturing of the aircraft. Let's now get ourselves sat down and comfortable and we'll start running through the checklists. So welcome to the cockpit of the Carenado Seneca V. As you can see, the conditions here in Hobart at the moment are rather hazy, which is quite interesting since the real world current weather is more or less cav-ok. Obviously though, that's not the point of today's video. We're here to look at the Carenado Seneca. So in that spirit we'll run the before start checklist. Pre-flight inspection has been completed. Flight planning is complete. After cabin door is closed. Cockpit door is closed. Seats are adjusted and secure. Seatbelts and harnesses are secure. Alternators can come on. Parking brake is set. Gear selector is down. Throttles are in the idle position. Propeller controls are in the fully forward position. Mixture controls are in the idle cutoff position. Friction handle has been set. Alternate air controls are off. Cowl flaps are open. Stabilator and rudder trim is set. Fuel selectors are on. Heater switch is off. Radio master is off. Electrical switches are off. Circuit breakers are checked in. And for the start itself, the propeller levers are fully forward. Battery master can come on. Gear lights, we're showing gear down and 3 greens. Fin strobe light is on. Throttles will open about 1 inch. Standby fuel pump, so we'll start the left-hand engine first. The left engine fuel pump can come on. As can the magnetos. We'll move the mixture up to the fully rich position. We do see a slight rise in fuel flow there, so back to idle cutoff. Checking that the prop area is clear, which it is. Clear prop! We'll engage the starter. We'll just feed in a little bit of mixture to get the engine to catch. And now bring the mixture up to the fully rich position. Bring the throttle back to idle around 1000 RPM. As you can hear, I think the engine sounds on the Seneca are unfortunately rather uninspiring. They're very quiet, rather dull. You can hear the fuel pump very easily over the engine sounds. Anyway, we are idling at 1000 RPM. The oil pressure is in the green. Standby fuel pump can come off. And the same now for the right hand engine, so the propeller controls are fully forward. Throttle is 1 inch open. Standby fuel pump can come on, as can the magnetos. Bringing the mixture up to the fully rich position. Again, a slight rise in fuel flow, back to the idle cutoff position. Checking that the prop area is clear, which it is. So we'll engage the starter. Again, just feed in a little bit of mixture. And now all the way up to fully rich. Once again, we have our 1000 RPM. Oil pressure is in the green. Standby fuel pump can come off. Get the radio master on. So first checking the aircraft's electrical systems. Showing an ampage on each side of 46.3 amps and a voltage of 24 volts. Checking the gyro suction. Showing a vacuum pressure there of 4.9 inches. And continuing down with the taxi checklist. So external power is removed, throttles are 1000 RPM, battery master is on, radio master switch is on, gyro, so HSI showing a heading of about 114 degrees there. And again, another Carenado aircraft where the compass is rather difficult to read, but I think I could just make out a heading of about 115 on the compass, so that checks. Altimeter, we'll just grab ourselves an ASUS, that's on a frequency of 12845.
Hobart Airport information Papa 06000. Wind 125 at 10. Visibility 6. Sky condition. Few clouds at 700 feet. Few clouds at 4,300 feet. Few clouds at 12,100 feet. Temperature 18. Dew point 10. QNH tree 0.21. Visual runway 12 in use. Landing and departing runway 12. DSR aircraft, say direction of flight. All aircraft read back hold short instructions. Advise controller, on initial contact, you have Papa.
So as you can hear, they're using runway 12 here at the moment, with the wind more or less straight down the runway. Altimeters are set, nav lights are on. Heater and defroster not required, fuel selectors are on. GNS units have been powered up. We do also have quite a nice little custom weather radar here. I believe it just uses the default sim radar itself, but it's nice to see a custom skin for it at least. We'll turn that on later on in the flight. Passenger briefing is complete. Transponder can go to standby. For the taxi checklist then, the taxi area is clear. Taxi light is on. Standby fuel pumps are not required. And for the taxi itself, we're currently on parking bay 7 here, on the secondary apron. So we'll taxi over towards the main apron, and then we'll join onto taxiway Alpha, and taxi down to holding point Charlie for an intersection departure. Parking brake can come off. We'll swing the aircraft around. Again, it is all clear. That's full left rudder, no braking required to get the aircraft to come around in the turn radius. Overall, the aircraft feels pretty reasonable to handle on the ground. Maybe a touch sensitive, which would be interesting to see how it feels during the takeoff. But once again, the engine sounds just really uninspiring. As you can hear, they're very, very quiet. Doesn't give any sense of power to the aircraft. They sound very generic as well, I have to say. Anyway, coming back off the power, on the brakes. I find you do need rather a lot of brake in the aircraft to get the aircraft to slow down. And we do get some nice ground handling sounds, but they're rather digital in nature. As you can hear, they're really just on or off, which does somewhat kill the immersion. It would be nicer if they faded in and out. Anyway, coming around onto the main apron, we'll take the next right to join onto taxiway Alpha. We'll switch the HSI over to GPS as we'll be flying the departure using the GPS for guidance. Again, on the brakes to slow the aircraft down for the turn. All clear on the right. The aircraft picks up speed pretty easily as well. I've got idle power here at the moment and having to brake fairly regularly to get the speed down again there. Anyway, for the departure briefing, it's the Canley 3 departure off runway 12, which is straight ahead initially, and then a left turn direct to waypoint Istig. Max speed 150 knots in the turn. We're looking for an altitude of 11,000 feet as our cruising altitude today. We have a few altitude restrictions on the departure. In terms of the terrain, there is some fairly significant high terrain around Hobart. The MSA for the departure is 5,600 feet. And as far as the weather goes, overall, it's actually seems to be improving a little bit now, and certainly it's good enough if we do need to come back to the field. So again, on the brakes, slowing the aircraft down. We'll hold short at the Charlie intersection. We'll carry out the engine run-up. Just taxi wide here and swing the aircraft around into wind. So, park brake on, come up to 1000 RPM. And for the run up, the parking brake is set, taxi light is off, mixtures are in the fully rich position, propeller controls are fully forward, throttles are set to 1000 RPM, engine instruments are checked. We'll bring the throttles up to 1500 RPM. As you can hear, even bringing the throttles up, the engine sounds still pretty below par. Anyway, there's 1500 RPM, we'll do a feather check. Looking for no more than a 300 RPM drop. So, left engine's good. Right engine's good. Bring the throttles now up to 1700 RPM. And we'll carry out a mag check. So checking the right magneto. There's about a 100 RPM drop there on the right. Back to both. And it's the same there on the left. And back to both. So mags are within limits on the left engine, we'll check the right engine now. Again, about a 100 RPM drop. Back to both. And checking the left. Again, about a 100 RPM drop. and back to both. So both sets of mags are both on. So magnetos are within limits, voltmeter is checked, alternator output is checked, annunciator panel lights just showing the pitot heat caution there at the moment, and testing the panel. Gyro suction, again showing 4.9 inches. Ice protection is not required, we'll bring the throttles back to 1000 RPM. So power is set, friction handle is set, the before takeoff checklist, doors are closed and latched, seatbacks are upright, seats are adjusted and secure, seatbelts are fastened and secure, armrests are stowed, battery master switch is on, alternator master switches are on, standby fuel pumps come on, flight instruments. So altimeters are checked, we'll set the HSI up for the departure. Looking for a track of 119 initially on the departure. We'll set the heading bug as well. And again the HSI showing a heading of about 115. Same on the compass. Get the flight director on as well for the departure. Engine instruments are checked. Prop heat is not required. Windshield heat is not required. Pitot heat can come on. Prop controls are fully forward. Mixtures are in the fully rich position. Alternate air is off. Flaps, we'll take flap 0 for the takeoff, we've got plenty of runway here at Hobart. Air conditioner is off, it's actually an op currently in the aircraft. Stabilator and rudder trims are set. Yaw damper is in the auto position, and again that's currently non-functional in the aircraft. Fuel selectors are on. Flight controls are full free and in the correct sense. For the lineup itself, landing light can come on, strobe lights can go on, transponder set to out, taxi light is off, runway, there's no runway markings here at the holding point, which of course they should be, but we know it's runway 12, and the flight instruments are checked. So parking brake can come off, we'll get ourselves lined up on the runway. All clear on final. Get the weather radar on there as well now. So just momentarily hold the aircraft on the brakes. So as you can hear, unfortunately the external engine sounds really no better than the internal engine sounds. In fact, to me they sound quite like an idling radial engine in nature really, quite a puttering sort of sound to the engine. Anyway, we'll get ourselves ready for the takeoff, so it'll be a normal takeoff using flaps 0. Stabilator and rudder trim is set. Mixture is fully rich, we'll be using 38 inches manifold pressure for the takeoff. Rotating at a speed of 79 knots. Once we have a positive climb, we'll get the gear up, and aiming to climb away at a speed of around 90 knots. So feet off the brakes. We'll slowly come up on the power to our 38 inches manifold pressure. So power is set, there's 79 knots coming back on the stick. And pitching for around 90 knots. Trimming the aircraft, positive climb, tap the brakes and gear up. And we'll climb straight ahead initially, then we'll follow the departure as we planned. Through 500 feet, so we'll come back to our climb power setting. 32 inches on the manifold pressure. And around 2500 RPM. Get ourselves turned back onto the departure track here. So overall the aircraft is quite sensitive on the rudder, as you'd expect from an aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but it's not too bad, and certainly the aircraft's very nice to fly, it's very smooth. Very responsive, as you can see, excellent performance as well. We're climbing around 1500 feet a minute at the moment with climb power sets. We're starting a turn out towards the north shortly. And coming up through 2,000 feet now. As usual with Microsoft Flight Simulator, as you can see, the GPS is somewhat useless for accurately following a track. It tends to give you quite broad directions. We'll start the turn in just a moment. Sky is a little bit darker out to the east, but we'll be climbing above all of that anyway. So according to the HSI, just coming onto our track now, we'll start our turn out towards the north. Just keep adjusting the power there to maintain 32 inches manifold pressure. And looking for a track now of 39 degrees. Get the heading bug adjusted there as well. Weather radar not currently picking anything up there. Just recycled it, now we are showing some weather. As usual, the weather radar and the sim massively overpainting the situation, so we'll pretty much just disregard that. Come out slightly on the range on the GPS. Now we'll just start slowly easing back on the mixtures as well now. Coming up through 4,000 feet. As you can see, the max TIT there for the leaning is 1650. So we'll aim for around 1600. And as I say, we're planning to climb up to an altitude of 11,000 feet, which hopefully should get us above this cloud layer. If it doesn't, we'll climb a little bit higher. Again, the aircraft is really pleasant to fly, it's very smooth, very responsive. Carenado aircraft do tend to be that way. Probably not the most accurate flight model, but it is very pleasant. Just coming up into the cloud layer, there's probably going to be a little bit of icing around there, so we'll get the prop heat and the windshield heat on. Keep coming back on those mixtures. Just coming into the tops of the cloud layer now. Half a mile to run to waypoint Istig. And coming through 7,500 feet, so we definitely will clear the tops of the clouds, that's good to see. We'll leave the anti-ice on just a little bit longer, make sure we disperse any icing that has accumulated. Not seeing any icing on the aircraft, but it's always a little bit difficult to tell in the sim, as some developers do model it, some don't. Getting a little bit of sync here off the clouds. Heading now 324, so we'll set that. And again we'll set the heading bug. We'll get the autopilot set up now, so we're coming to heading. Go VS of around 1500 feet a minute. Set the autopilot on. So quite an abrupt change there from the autopilot. As you can see, that does tend to plague the Carenado aircraft somewhat. Also a fairly significant descent there momentarily, but looks like the autopilot is now going to adjust, give us our desired performance. So once again, typical of a Carenado aircraft, but the autopilot not functioning as we would like to see there, although it does do the job overall. And again, coming back on the mixtures as we climb. We'll come into nav, see how the autopilot does there at tracking the departure routing. So swinging out to the left, obviously we are slightly to the right of track at the moment, although that is quite an aggressive turn for a very shallow intercept there. 1,000 feet to go. Just wait until we've got 500 feet to go and then we'll reduce our vertical speed. So we'll come back to 500 feet a minute. So again, the autopilot is doing the job we wanted to do. It is ultimately tracking the departure routing there, but again, quite an aggressive manoeuvre to achieve a very straightforward intercept. So speed building now as we climb at a reduced rate there. And once we get to 11,000 feet, we'll level the aircraft off and come back to our cruise power setting. Through 10,000 feet now, so the landing light can come off. Get the fuel pumps off there as well. That makes everything a bit nicer and a bit quieter for us. And just coming up on cruise altitude. So we'll hit out. And again, the autopilot levelling us off as it should. Fuel's looking good. One thing I do really like this gauge, I think it's quite nicely done, and also it gives us the option to look through various power tables, which I think is really nice. So we'll go with 75% power, that's a power setting of 29.3 inches, 2400 RPM. So coming back on the power. Anyway, we're now nicely established in the cruise, so we'll head outside, we'll take a look at the external model of the aircraft on our way over to Devonport, and we'll come back once again just before the top of descent and the arrival into Devonport itself. you can see, we're just coming up to about 9 minutes to run now towards Devonport. We've just passed Abeam Launceston not too long ago. Getting fairly late evening now here on the island of Tasmania, and we're just about to start our descent. So we'll come into VS, we'll set a descent rate for around 1,000 feet a minute. Come back off the power slightly to account for that. And for the descent checklist, the throttles are set as required. Mixtures will slowly increase up to the fully ripped position as we descend. Cowl flaps are closed. Altimeter is set. Windshield defrost is off. And that is the descent checklist complete. So as you can see, we're currently tracking inbound towards waypoint Delta Victor Oscar Echo Charlie. We'll descend down to 5,900 feet initially, as that's the MSA going into Devonport. Once we pass over the waypoint, we can descend down to an altitude of 3,000 feet. Unfortunately, we're experiencing the bug where once you activate an approach in the sim, it then messes up your direct to waypoint, so we'll just have to fly the rest in heading using the GPS for visual guidance. Just coming through 10,000 feet now, we'll get the landing light on. So as you'll have seen on the external model, again overall a really nice job from Carenado, and the engine sounds are significantly better once the engines are at a high power setting, albeit they could still use some work. And again, with the interior engine sounds, I don't think they're anything special. But overall, once again, the aircraft is very nice to fly, and the autopilot has all the same issues as the other Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft, but it does just about get the job done. And just about to bust into the tops of the cloud layer. In we go. And just about to pass over the waypoint now, so as I say, we can descend down to 3,000 feet, we'll be clear of the terrain. Just keep adjusting that heading around to the left, keep us roughly on the flight plan track. So as you can see, we're just passing over Delta Victor Oscar Echo Charlie, which means we can now descend down to 3,000 feet. Keep adjusting the heading bug to fly the approach. And just coming up on the northern coastline here of Tasmania. Devonport just out to the west, as you can see. In fact, we'll take the autopilot out now. And we'll do some manual flying around for the approach onto runway 24. So we'll just come all the way back on the power for a moment, just to allow us to take the landing gear. Max gear speed is 128 knots. So we'll take the gear down. And we're showing 3 greens. We'll trim the aircraft for around 100 knots at the moment. So for the downwind checks, the brakes are checked and off, undercarriage is down, mixture is rich, fuel pumps are on, landing light is on, instruments are checked, and the harness is secure. Flight director can come off as well now, we're not using that anymore. And slightly high here on the approach at the moment, but that's of no concern at the moment. Got plenty of time to correct that. Maintain 100 knots for now. We'll start taking some flat once we get a bit closer to the field. And again, the aircraft is very nice to hand fly. It's very responsive on the controls. Once you've got it trimmed, it's a very stable platform. Just take a moment to appreciate the absolutely stunning graphics that we sometimes see in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Anyway, we'll try and focus on the task at hand. So I'll take a stage of flap now, that should help us to get back on profile. Maintain 100 knots down fine, and we're looking for a speed of 90 knots over the threshold. And landing on runway 24, we'll be vacating off to the left. So the landing checklist, the mixture controls are in the fully rich position. Propeller controls can come to the full forward position. Landing gear is down, we have 3 greens. Air conditioner is off, your damper is in the auto position, brakes are tested and off, and the landing light is on. It's the landing checklist complete. Just slightly to the right of the runway centre line at the moment, so we'll correct that. And slowly coming back onto profile as well here, so we'll come up on the power. Passing through 2,000 feet, as you can see. Doing a descent rate of around 500 feet a minute at the moment. A few little bumps here in the evening air, but overall again the aircraft really smooth and pretty stable. I can trim it out, I'll let go of the controls I have right now, and as you can see it will pretty much sit exactly where it's trimmed, which is nice to see. We'll get the weather radar off as well now, we obviously don't need that any longer. It'll save us forgetting to turn it off on the ground. Take another stage of flap. Not feeling too much in terms of drag or any sort of balloon effect from the flap there. So the flight model perhaps once again a bit simplified with the Carenado aircraft. Again, very pretty there with the little islands out in the sea and the sunlight reflecting off the ocean. We'll take full flap now. Feeling a bit more drag and a little bit more of a effect from the flaps there. So pitch is full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps are set, landing clearance is not required, the runway is clear. We'll start letting the speed come back to 90 knots. Just a few little bumps here on the approach, so having to move around on the controls quite a bit here just to keep us on the runway centre line. And we should be back on the Pappy momentarily. if that PAPI is actually showing correctly. It looks to me like we're a little bit low now. So coming over the threshold, come off the power. Flared a little bit high there, holding the aircraft off. There's touchdown. The aircraft's very easy to land. It feels like you get a lot of feedback from the aircraft in the flare. And the exit just coming up on our left, so again we'll get the aircraft slowed down. Vacating off to the left. And clear of the runway, we'll get the flaps up. Taxi straight ahead onto the apron and we'll find somewhere to park up. So the after landing checklist flaps are retracted. Cowl flaps. Getting a little bit dark in here now, a little bit tricky to see, so we'll just turn our flashlight on momentarily. Cowl flaps are open. Air conditioning is off, weather radar is off, and standby fuel pumps are off. So we'll just take this parking area up on the left. Get the aircraft stopped and then shut down. After we shut the aircraft down, I'll just run briefly through a engine out example just to show you how the Carenado Seneca V handles in terms of single engine operation and feathering, things of that nature. And then we'll cap off the review with my overall thoughts and opinions on the aircraft. Anyway, park brake is on, come up to 1000 RPM. Again, I'll just turn the flashlight on so that we can see what we're doing a little bit better. So continuing with the checklist, strobes should go back to fin strobe, landing light can come off. Pitot heat is off. Prop heat and windshield heat can come off, as can the ice light. Transponder will set to standby. And the shutdown checklist, parking brake is set. Taxi and landing lights are off. Heater is off, nav light is off, transponder is off, radio master switch can come off, electrical equipment is off, throttles will move to the idle position, and mixtures will move to the idle cutoff position. So we have two good shutdowns. We'll get the cockpit lighting on as well, but you'll find that that doesn't really do enough to fully illuminate the cockpit in nighttime conditions. Just turn the flashlight off there to give you a demonstration. Overall you can see enough, but you're still a little bit blind when it comes to things like the parking brake. Anyway, the magnetos can come off. Strobe lights can come off. Alternator switches can come off. Panel lights, again we'll have to turn on our flashlight here just to dim the panel lights. We'll leave the switch ones on for now as we're going to need to find the battery in just a moment. So panel lights are off and the battery master can come off. So that's the shutdown checklist complete. As I said, we'll now head back up into the air. We'll run through a quick engine out sequence, and then I'll cap off the review by giving you my overall thoughts and opinions on the product. So as you can see, we're back up in the air overhead Devonport at the moment. As I say, we'll run through a simulated engine failure now, get a feel for how the aircraft behaves, check whether or not we can indeed fail the propeller. So we'll come back on the mixture to idle cutoff engine 2. As you can see, the aircraft wanting to swing out to the side of the dead engine there, and now going into a bank. So we'll ease off on that with the aileron. Currently the ball's out to the left, so we'll correct that with some left rudder. and the airspeed slowly bleeding back, so we'll have to trim to correct for that. So far so good. We'll come up on the power on the live engine. So the mixture will leave in the current position. Pitch can go full fine. Prop is set to full power there. As we come up on the power, again having to feed in some more rudder. And we'll now try feathering the right engine, so we'll bring the right propeller lever all the way back to the feather position. Looks like it's running down. The blades look to be feathered, and you can see that the prop has feathered correctly. Now that we've done that, you can see that although I was maintaining the same amount of rudder there, we're now showing the ball out to the right. So we can actually ease off on that rudder pressure slightly. The engine does seem to now be producing less drag. And as you can see, the aircraft does have sufficient performance to maintain around 95 knots on a single engine at 10,000 feet. Lastly, while we're here, we might as well come all the way back on the power. We'll see how the aircraft handles in the stall. You'll have to excuse the gear warning horn there. In fact, we'll take the gear down just to cancel that. So we'll try a power off stall. Just coming through 70 knots. There's the stall horn. A little bit of buffeting as well. Nice to see. And the nose does drop. And in fact, we do even go into somewhat of a spin there. So that's actually really impressive to see from Carenado. Not the sort of thing you would usually expect from them, but credit where credit is due. That was actually a lot better than most other aircraft that I've seen in the sim. Anyway, as I say, we'll now cap off the review by running through my overall impressions of the Carenado Seneca V. So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed our trip out in the Carenado Piper Seneca V. I have to say, overall I was very pleasantly surprised with the aircraft actually. As usual, it's very much up to the Carenado standards in terms of the modelling and the texturing. But as we saw, overall the aircraft systems as well done to a pretty reasonable standard. And even the flight modelling there, as we saw, the engine out seemed to go pretty well. And we've managed to get a stall and a spin out of the aircraft, which, as I said, is something we don't see in too many Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft to date. Really, the only big letdown for me as far as the Seneca V is concerned is the engine sounds. Again, those did sound a little bit better once we're in the cruise. My one other gripe with the product really is the autopilot, but again we've seen that in other Carenado aircraft, and let's be honest, the autopilot in the sim in general is hardly stellar at the moment. Overall though, I'm still very happy with the Carenado Seneca V. I do think the aircraft is rather nice. It does have a little bit more get up and go than the Piper Seminole that Carenado recently produced, so I think it will be quite a nice option on longer distance trips, and I definitely envisage myself flying the aircraft again. Overall, as I say, I really like the design and the aesthetics in the cockpit. It's really an aircraft that's right up my street. And all in all, with the exception of the engine sounds, I'm really struggling to find too much to pick fault with the Seneca V. It's great to see that Carenado haven't fallen into their old ways. I was a bit worried after the Arrow 3 that might be the case. As always, be aware that you won't be getting a study level product, of course, but you do get a very nice model of the Seneca, and there is enough systems depth there to run through the procedures accurately. We still don't have too many twin-engine piston aircraft available in the sim, so this is a nice option if you're looking for another one. And overall, I think I would say that the Carenado Seneca V is probably my favourite piston twin available in the sim to date. In terms of the aircraft's FPS hit, it's not too bad overall. Generally I was seeing about 8 frames less than the default Cessna 152. Once again guys, I do hope you enjoyed our little trip out in the Seneca V from Hobart over towards Devonport. If you did enjoy the video and found it to be of use, then once again, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, thank you very much, and I'll see you all again soon.